According to psychologists, the average person is seriously betrayed 3 times in their lifetime. But for me, it was one person, a single, continuous betrayal that lasted 40 years. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old, but this story began when I was 19. I grew up in one of those small, lush North Carolina towns that wake up to birdsong. I was raised in a religious family. My father was a carpenter. My mother sang in the church choir. My life was predictable but peaceful. I first met George at the town's farmer's market. We reached for the same apple at a stand, and our hands touched. Cliché? Maybe. But sometimes clichés are the very essence of truth. George smiled at me. His teeth were straight. And though I didn't say it, his voice made me tremble inside. Our first date was at the town's old movie theater. We watched a black and white film. His fingers fidgeted as he held my hand. Walking home that night, my heart felt like it was beating in my stomach. You know, back then, someone's smile alone could make the world stop. George was a man of his word. A month later, he met my family. My mother loved him immediately. My father was a bit cautious but respectful. He proposed under the rose tree in the church garden. "Laugh with me for a lifetime, Margaret," he said. I accepted, laughing, like a dim but hopeful star. Our wedding was at the end of summer, crickets chirping in the background, our vows in the foreground. Loyalty, love, understanding. Looking into George's eyes, I suspected nothing. Everything had begun so purely. The first year of our marriage was like a fairy tale. George woke up early every morning and made my coffee. We'd picnic on weekends. We'd read books together. Sundays began with church, Mondays with hope. I started working as a teacher's aide at a school. George worked at a local insurance company. We didn't make good money, but we laughed well. Then the children came. First my son Daniel, then my daughter Rachel, and youngest Daniel Jr. Our house filled up. Our hearts overflowed. Sleepless nights, tired days, but we were happy. George seemed like a good father. He'd read stories in the evenings, make them eggs in the morning. If you've made it this far, let me ask you a question. When you find the first love of your life, don't you believe everything will last forever? I used to believe that. Back then, the year Daniel started elementary school, George got promoted at his company. He was now a regional manager. More salary, but that meant more responsibility. Being a regional manager meant sometimes missing dinner. It also meant urgent documents, arriving at midnight. At first I tried to understand. He's working for our life, I told myself. But then the children started noticing too. Rachel would ask, "Isn't Daddy coming home tonight either?" And I'd lie. "He's tired, sweetie. He needs to work a bit more." I remember the first day he put a password on his phone. It rang at the dinner table. He didn't answer. Then he quietly put it in his pocket. "Work-related," he said. "I need to handle it." That night he spent the night in the living room for the first time. He didn't say why. I didn't ask. I felt a pang in my heart but ignored it. We socialized with friends from church. Among them, my closest was a woman named Claire. She was my daughter's godmother. A sweet woman. Calm, understanding, helpful. George always described her as like family. We'd have Sunday dinners together. Claire would joke with George, and George would laugh it off. Back then, I'd feel a bit jealous, but then scold myself. "She's your friend. Don't be ridiculous, Margaret." George was smiling less and less. Breakfast became silent. At one point I asked myself, is this what being married is always like? Doesn't every marriage wear down over time? Doesn't everyone become a bit of a stranger eventually? But still, some nights George would come home happy. His eyes would sparkle. I'd think it was a work success. Now I understand that sparkle wasn't for me. That joy was on someone else's face. One night I had a dream, George suitcase in hand, silently leaving the house. I ran after him, but he didn't hear me. When I woke up, my pillow was soaked. Let me ask you another question. Can you tell when a person has changed from their eyes? I couldn't. Or maybe I could, but couldn't admit it to myself. Years chased each other. The children grew up. Life buried us in its rush. But the silent pain inside me deepened. George was home, but it was as if he wasn't there. We talked but said nothing. He'd watch the evening news while I washed dishes in the kitchen. Silence had become our home's new language. Claire was with us more than ever. Now she'd visit not once a week, but 3 or 4 times. I brought a book for Daniel, she'd say. I knitted a new sweater for Rachel, and I'd smile as if pleased. Yet somewhere inside me, something writhed with great unease. One evening, when George came home from work, he was wearing a handsome new tie. "Did you just buy that?" I said. "Claire gave it to me," he said. I just stood there. I couldn't speak. I swallowed. I even said, "It looks great." What would you have done? When you realized the man you love was getting this close to someone he called friend, would you watch silently, or would you demand answers? I stayed silent. Maybe I was a coward, or maybe it was so my family wouldn't fall apart. For years I suppressed everything. I lost myself. When I looked in the mirror, the beautiful woman was gone. In her place was someone exhausted, trying to keep up with the kitchen, laundry, and helping children with homework. But that day came. George got sick. A suspicious liver condition. It was progressing quickly. Doctors said be prepared. And at that moment, for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me. As George lay in bed, he held my hand. "Margaret, I need to tell you the truth," he said. I looked into his eyes. It was like looking at that man I hadn't seen in years. "Claire and we've been together for 27 years. I just looked. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just froze. Just like that woman inside me who had frozen years ago." George closed his eyes to life 3 weeks later. At his funeral, Claire was in the front row. She wore black. She was beautiful. Even elegant. My children didn't understand what had happened. But for the first time, I saw everything so clearly. And nothing was over yet. George gave his last breath, just 5 days before his death. Margaret was at the hospital that last day too. She held his hand, said goodbye. "I'm hurt by you," she said. "But I haven't decided whether I'll forgive you." A week after the funeral, they were invited to the lawyer's office. Margaret was waiting with her children for the will to be read. In her hands were George's old watch, ring, old photographs from the children. But what was written in that document hit them in the face, like years of betrayal. George had put the house in Claire's name. The home of years, where the children were born, took their first steps, was in another woman's name. Margaret couldn't speak. Daniel Jr. stood up. "This must be a mistake. This is our home," he shouted. The lawyer raised his eyebrow. "Mr. George signed this document 2 years ago. The entire deed has been transferred to Claire Johnson's name." Margaret returned home that night. But she no longer belonged there. A week later, Claire came. Documents in hand. "By law, this place is mine now," she said. That smug smile. "But if you hurry, I can give you time to take some of your belongings." Margaret's silent scream echoed through the rooms. She had lived in that house for 40 years. Every wall, every crack, every stone had a memory. But now, Claire had written her name over those memories. What hurts a woman most? Being cheated on, or being thrown out of her home. When I closed the door of that house for the last time, what I left behind wasn't just 4 walls. Disappointment, betrayal, humiliation, and a lifetime of silence also remained behind that door. Walking down that street with my 3 children, only a few suitcases in our hands, no one looked up. Everyone had heard something but no one was talking. That small town where fear and gossip coexisted had become like a grave to me. We spent our first night in an old motel. The walls were damp, but smelled of freedom. Rachel held my hand. "Mom, everything will be better from now on, right?" At that moment, I couldn't lie. I just nodded. The following week I looked for work. No one wanted me. I was old, broken, seemed unmotivated. But then a small library announced they were looking for a volunteer. I went. I had neither references nor hope, but something inside me was still alive. Maybe stubbornness, maybe pride, maybe just maternal instinct. I started as a volunteer. While arranging books on shelves, I began to pull my own life together. Getting lost among the pages felt like forgetting my own story. But gradually, I realized I had a story to tell too, and maybe others would want to listen. I started a blog, A Woman's Second Life. I wrote every week. At first no one read it. Then one day, someone left a comment. I cried reading these lines. Thank you. That day, I was reborn. The library offered me a paid position. The children started succeeding in school, and I started waking up early every morning and making my own coffee, not like George used to, in my own style, stronger, simpler, but like a life coming from my own hands. When I passed by that old house years later, Claire was sitting at the door. Her hair had grayed, her face was tired. Our eyes met. She seemed like she wanted to say something to me, but she stayed silent, because there was nothing left to say, and I smiled. A sincere, peaceful smile. They broke me, threw me out of my home, stole my past, but I took back my future. And you, if you're reading these lines, if one day you too are leveled to the ground, remember, a second life can be stronger than the first. 10 years passed. The children grew up. I grew old, but my soul had never been this young. That day, during my morning walk, I turned onto the street of our old neighborhood. Not deliberately, it was like a trick of my subconscious, or maybe it was time for a confrontation. I stopped in front of the house, that house, where I dreamed for years, raised my children, where my heart was buried, but it wasn't mine anymore. That house was now a symbol of my past, that no longer belonged to me, but of a fate I could face. Claire was sitting on the porch, her face sunken, her hair disheveled, her eyes expressionless. She noticed me. Our gazes met. She seemed like she wanted to say something, but she was in no condition to form a sentence. She silently bowed her head, and I kept walking, my shoulders straight, my steps clear, because I was walking for myself, now, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, not as someone's victim, just as Margaret. Only one sentence passed through my mind. He lied to me, but I stayed true to myself. If you too have risen from the ashes one day, leave a heart in the comments. This story is no longer just mine, it's ours.